So, one of the reasons why I felt it was an important time to return to this topic of a spirit-centered life is precisely because we've had so much activity over the summer. And of course, what happens in life is that we can so quickly go from the vast cosmic perspective to the itty-bitty details of life. And suddenly things go from being extremely cosmic and vast and peaceful and spacious to stressful, and I think the word might be myopic. Is that the right word? And all we see are the challenges right before us. And so when we work to do things like raise money or put on events, we can become very consumed by all those details. And suddenly it feels like what we're doing here is hosting events and raising money and fixing roofs. But that's not what we're doing. Those are just symptoms of what we're doing. And what we're doing is we are striving each and together to live a spirit-centered life. And it helps to have a place to do it. It helps to have people to do it with. It helps to have some quasi-focal point of leadership, so that we can continue the journey. And so I was doing some of my own reading and studying while I was away, and I was reading Taoism, Taoist texts and teachings, some of my favorite, really. And I came across one story which I hadn't read in a long time, and I thought it was so apropos for today. And it's the story of a seeker, could be any one of us, very dedicated to their spiritual path, wanting to awaken to the oneness of all that is, to the Tao, which in my mind is just kind of another word for spirit or God or consciousness. And this seeker went to a refuge. You might think of it as a temple or a monastery where there was a great Taoist master. And the seeker was studying and, doing the practices and the meditation and the workshops and the sutras and the readings and the whole deal. And, kind of set aside some time as we do. In this case, I imagine something like a 40-day immersion, a deep retreat. But it was getting closer and closer to that time to go home. And you know that feeling. I think it can happen on a Sunday, or it can happen even on a weekend retreat or something, and you're enjoying it and you're immersed in it, but all of a sudden you start to evaluate, did I get enough out of it? Like, did I really understand enough to take home? So the student starts to get a little panicky and asks for a private audience with the head master, the teacher. And so goes to see her under a beautiful tree, you imagine beside the temple, and kind of expresses some worry and frustration about going home. I feel so peaceful here. I think I understand the principles that you've taught us, oneness and so on, but I'm not sure I've quite integrated it. Like, I get some of it, but I don't really get all of it. Could you go over it again? What is it I'm supposed to remember going home? And the master says, oh, don't worry, my dear, we all feel like this. But you're trying too hard. You're trying too hard. You are already spirit. You are the Tao. The Tao is working through you. It can't not work through you. We are all an expression of the source from which we came, and therefore, in every moment where we feel it or not, we are a part of spirit. The infinite, the blessed, the sacred, the vast, the all-wise and omnipotent. Right, that's, I think, where I get confused as the student. It's like, I get that the Tao or God, consciousness, I get that's vast and powerful and wise and beautiful and infinite and perfect. The part that I don't get is how is that me? Because see, I make a lot of mistakes. So I'm clearly not wise. I feel like I'm aging rapidly. so I'm clearly not infinite. And, I came here because I'm not always at peace. So how am I that? Because that thing you just described does not describe me. I see your problem, said the master. Well, I see. This is a complicated question, and maybe we should pick this up this afternoon, after a little monastic lunch. But do me a favor. When you come back to our meeting after lunch, I'd like you to take this bowl. She offered a small bowl to the student, and go down to the river and bring me some river water. And then we can resume our conversation. Well, sure enough, like a good student, student goes off, a little more meditating, a little more journal writing, a little more sutra reading, and then is about to go to the appointment, but stops by the river, scoops up the river water, and comes to the master. Master, I brought you the river water you asked for. And the master looks a little bit disappointed. I asked you to bring me river water. What's this? And the student's a little bit shocked. Very dedicated student. This is river water. I don't think so, says the master. The student looks in and looks back at the path, can see the river. It's like, no, this is definitely river water. And the master says, no, I'm sure this is not river water because I've been to the river. The river is full of fish. There are reeds in the river. I've seen, creatures like beavers and otters in the river. I don't see any of those things in here. I've seen children playing by the river. In fact, I've watched the river flowing from the high peaks down all the way to where it ultimately ends in the ocean. I see no mountain. I see no ocean. What kind of a trick is this? This is clearly not river water. And the student, very puzzled, says, well, that's not all in there. This is from the river, but the river is greater than this bowl of water. Surely you know that. I mean, if there was some kind of way to test the water, taste it or do some analysis, you could see this is clearly the same substance. It has the same memory. It has the same contact. I don't get it. The master sighs and said, well, fine, whatever. You say it's a part of the river. Why don't you just take it back to the river and pour it back in and then come back and we'll talk. You can tell me what happens when you pour it back into the river that you supposedly took it from. So the student goes back with the bowl, now really feeling confused, like, I thought I didn't understand anything, and now I know my master doesn't either. We're all in trouble. And so the student pours it back in. Of course, it immediately merges with the rest of the river. The student goes back and sits down with the master, and waits for something to happen. The master says, so, did you take it back? Yes. And what happened? Well, it returned to the river. Could you go and get me the same bowl of water from the river again? And the student said, come on now. This is getting ridiculous. Clearly, the water can come from the river, but not be the river. And clearly, when I put the water back in, it becomes one with the river. It's connected to the children and the mountain and the ocean and the fish and the... Oh, I see. And the student finally understood what was being taught. And so it is that we all seek this lesson. And we often are confused and confounded by this trick of the mind that we think we're separate, we look separate, we don't always feel the qualities of the totality of spirit, and yet, just as that bowl of water holds all the memory and energy and wisdom and consciousness of that river, of course the river is greater. Of course spirit is greater than any one physical manifestation. But is spirit not also within that manifestation? Is its memory not there? Is its energy and essence not still present? Right here, in every single one of you, each of us, like a bowl from that extraordinary river. And true, in time, we will also be poured back in. And will we mourn that day? Well, if you're really passionate about carrying around a bowl of river water for eternity, you might be sad. Or you might see the incredible miracle that's happening as that which was separate returns to that which it came from, and in an instant becomes one, indistinguishable, inseparable, all one, and perhaps may be drawn from the river again. So this is us. This is what we are doing, I do believe, on Sundays or Tuesdays or Wednesdays or Saturdays, depending when you come here. We are taking moments, moment after moment, practice after practice, to go back to the riverside. Maybe sometimes to empty our bowl and to feel that unity again, to remember what it's like to be indistinguishable from our source. Or perhaps we're gathering the bowl and we remember where it comes from and then we carry it into our week. This is the exercise of the spiritual path. Now, we have been a community committed to awakening and mysticism and enlightenment for over 100 years, but let's just put things in perspective. We're here to be the bowl of water in life, not the river. And yes, there are those that dwell by the riverside. There are those of the infinite consciousness. And there aren't many of them. There never was, and there probably never will be. And that's totally fine. That just seems to be the nature of our creation. But does that mean we don't go back to the river? Does it mean we don't draw the bowl and contemplate the unity, the oneness? No, in fact, it makes that exercise all the more important. Recently, on a separate note, I was introduced to a Hungarian research psychologist. Some of you may have heard of him. It took quite a bit for me to learn how to pronounce his name. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I said it right. Have you ever heard of him? Anyone? Yeah. Incredible, incredible story. So this man was about 7 years old as the Second World War was coming to an end, living in Eastern Europe. And over those years, as he journeyed from, as he talks about it, sort of age 7 to age 10, he watched his community, his family, his friends, all his points of reference be torn apart, challenged in the most dramatic and profound ways. Work torn away, family members torn away. But he says that what captivated his attention as he moved towards his teenage years was the fact that some people seemed to remain resilient, buoyant, positive, connected, despite all this. Much like other great psychologists of the last 100 years, he started to question what makes those people so exceptional, what makes them so peaceful, rather than focusing on pathology or illness. Now, in time, his work became influenced by Carl Jung, Abraham Maslow, and so on. What he came up with was very interesting. He coined the term flow states. Now, flow states is what William James, the scholar of world religions, called mystical experiences, and what Abraham Maslow called peak experiences, the moments in life where all separateness diminishes, where you're completely consumed by being in the moment, And it is as if the universe were flowing right through you. You are not doing your life. Life is just doing you. Can you kind of picture that? Or do you remember that? We've all had glimpses of that. From time to time, it could be while playing the didgeridoo. It could be while planting a garden. Who knows when and where you had that moment. But we've had those moments where all identity and self-obsession ceases and only the flow of what occurs in the moment or what is occurring in the moment remains. And what he says is that the most extraordinary people, and he was intrigued by characters like Eleanor Roosevelt and Albert Einstein and these kinds of exceptional people. What he found is that the most exceptional and resilient people return to those flow states throughout their life, frequently as they can. And none of them pretend to be mystics. None of them say they're enlightened. But it's the perpetual intention to return, to reach that state again and again and again, even if it's briefly, even if it's once a month or once a year, but to return to the moment in which the mystical consciousness, the consciousness of the river that the Master spoke of, is restored. And through that, we have the reference point to go through our challenges, to access our creativity, to feel our potential, and to know when times are difficult and we feel threatened, fearful, small, and human, that is just a brief and temporary illusion. And so, this is what I wanted to share with you today. The fact that this journey is meant to be a process, and the feeling of separateness is a part of the design. But that is precisely the motivation, to find the practices, find the people, find the places, find the things that give you that moment's remembering who you really are, where we really come from, and what is really happening. Because as you know, as in control as you sometimes feel, and as in control as you'd like to be, the true nature of life flows on with you, within you, without you. And the fastest way to become effortless in your life, at peace in your life, is simply to release all attachment, all longing, all identity into the flow of the moment, and allow life to reveal itself. Compassion reveals itself. Connection reveals itself. And yes, it can come as simply as walking your dog, pouring a cup of coffee, or looking out the window. So let's take a moment as we close this reflection and close our eyes. And I'm just going to invite you to find a memory of some activity or place where you feel in that flow, where you feel yourself connected to that infinite river of consciousness. Even if it's just a little glimpse, a little taste. Could be painting, could be walking, could have been a long time ago, or it could have been just hours ago. But just find one memory of what returns you to the source. And see if you can cultivate that taste in your mouth, that feeling in your heart. And see if you can cultivate some kind of an intention to return to that state by simply being present, by just being in the moment, wherever you are and whenever you are.